Story 1. I've always found comfort in the predictability of the night sky. As an amateur astronomer who spent countless nights mapping constellations from my friend Mike's backyard, I thought I knew every quirk of our local celestial sphere, even accounting for the light pollution that bleeds up from the city. But what happened last night has shattered that certainty, along with my understanding of what exists above us. I need to document this while I still can, while my hands are steady enough to type. The evening started normally enough. I arrived at Mike's house at 9:15, thermal mug of coffee in hand, telescope bag slung over my shoulder. The unusual clarity of the sky immediately caught my attention. Not a single cloud marred the vast expanse above, a rarity for our area. The stars seemed somehow sharper, more numerous than usual, as if someone had adjusted the contrast on reality itself. Even the familiar constellations looked different, their patterns more deliberate, almost like they'd been rearranged by an unseen hand. "Perfect night for viewing," Mike said, helping me set up the telescope on his back deck. The wooden planks creaked beneath our feet as we positioned the equipment, the sound oddly loud in the still night air. Neither of us knew then how wrong he was, how this perfect night would become a nightmare that would haunt us forever. I remember checking my phone, 9:27 p.m. The temperature was dropping faster than usual for early autumn, creating a thin layer of fog that hugged the ground around the base of the trees. Through my telescope, I was tracking Betelgeuse, noting how unusually bright it appeared when everything changed. The first anomaly appeared at 9:30. I was adjusting the focus when a brilliant white flash erupted behind the tree line bordering Mike's subdivision. This wasn't the familiar flicker of heat lightning or the steady beam of aircraft. The flash filled a terrifying portion of the sky, like a cosmic camera flash. My hands trembled on the telescope, leaving Betelgeuse forgotten. The light had a quality I'd never seen before, almost solid, as if you could reach out and touch it. "Did you?" Mike started. "Yeah," I cut him off. "That wasn't normal." We waited, phones out, checking weather radar and flight paths, searching for any rational explanation, finding none. The silence between us grew heavier with each passing minute. I noticed then that the crickets had stopped chirping, though I couldn't remember exactly when the silence had begun. At 9:45, everything changed again, and this time, there was no pretending we were witnessing any kind of natural phenomenon. The second flash appeared, this one a deep arterial red, 90 degrees east of the first location. My stomach lurched as I realized these weren't random occurrences. They were communicating. The red flash would pulse, and 5 seconds later, like clockwork, the white flash would respond. Each exchange seemed to lift them higher, as if they were climbing an invisible staircase above the tree line. The red light had a different quality than the white. It seemed to absorb the darkness around it rather than illuminate it. I found myself counting the seconds between flashes, trying to discern a pattern. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3. The precision was unnatural. Each 5-second interval was exact, down to the millisecond. No human technology I knew of could maintain such perfect timing. By 10 cyan, I couldn't ignore the watching anymore. That's what it felt like. We weren't observing them. They were observing us. A third flash joined the symphony, white like the first, but positioned to the south, creating a triangle of lights above our subdivision. They maintained their terrible rhythm: red, white, white, red, red, white, red, white, white. Each sequence slightly different, like a language we couldn't comprehend, or worse, a language we weren't meant to comprehend. Then came the sound. It started as a low whir, just at the edge of hearing, but it felt wrong in a way that bypassed my ears and went straight to my lizard brain. The neighborhood went silent. No crickets, no frogs, no nocturnal birds. Just that whir, growing louder, more insistent. The local dogs began howling, not their usual territorial barking, but long, mournful sounds I'd never heard them make before. It was as if they could sense something we couldn't, something that terrified them at a primal level. I noticed something else too, something I haven't told anyone else yet. Each time the lights flashed, for a fraction of a second, I could see something in the spaces between them. Shapes. Geometries that hurt to look at. They weren't three-dimensional. They seemed to fold in on themselves in ways that shouldn't be possible, creating angles that made my vision blur and my head ache. And with each pattern of flashes, they seemed to be getting clearer, more defined, more real. The air temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees since we'd started observing. My breath came out in visible puffs, though it was supposed to be a mild night. The cold felt different too. It seemed to come from above, from whatever was happening in that triangle of lights. At 10:30, I couldn't take it anymore. The pressure in my head had become unbearable, and I could feel something trying to take shape in my mind, something that didn't belong there. I should head home, I told Mike, my voice sounding strange and flat in the transformed night air. He just nodded, still staring upward, his face illuminated by the rhythmic flashes. I noticed his nose was bleeding, though he didn't seem aware of it. The drive home was surreal. The flashes followed me, visible through my windshield, the rearview mirror, the side windows. The whirring grew louder as I drove, and I realized with mounting horror that it wasn't just coming from above anymore. It seemed to be emanating from inside my car's electronics. My radio display flickered with each flash sequence, though I hadn't turned it on. The numbers on the digital clock cycled randomly, and my phone's screen kept turning on and off, displaying fragments of text messages I hadn't written. When I finally reached home, I rushed inside and began typing this account. I need someone to know what happened, because the flashes are still ascending and the whirring hasn't stopped. But what terrifies me most is what I'm seeing now through my home office window. The shapes between the flashes are fully visible. They're opening something up there like a door or a wound in the sky itself. And whatever's on the other side is starting to reach through. I can hear footsteps on my roof now. They don't sound human. The rhythm is wrong. Too many beats, too many points of contact. Like something with more than two legs is moving up there. My phone just lit up with a text from Mike. They're coming down. They showed me what's coming. God help us. The power in my house is starting to pulse in rhythm with the flashes. Red, white, white, red, red, white. Each time the lights flicker, I catch glimpses of impossible shadows on my walls, cast by nothing I can see. The shadows have too many angles, too many limbs, and they're getting closer. I think they found what they were looking for, and I think it was us. Story 2. I never told anyone the whole truth about what happened during my last night at Lake Salvation Christian Camp. For years, I've carried the weight of those memories alone, questioning my sanity and faith. But now, 15 years later, I need to share what really occurred after that final mass. I was 22 then, hired as a drummer for the summer youth program. Though not religious myself, I enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere and the way music brought everyone together during evening services. The lake stretched out behind the chapel like black glass, surrounded by dense pine forest that seemed to scrape the stars. Most nights, the only sounds were crickets and the soft lapping of water against the shore. The trouble started on a Tuesday. After Mass, 4 of us counselors decided to sit by the lake, myself, Sarah from the choir, and 2 junior counselors, Marcus and Jenny. The night was unusually still, the kind of quiet that makes you whisper without knowing why. We were lying on our backs, counting shooting stars, when Sarah pointed upward. "Look at that one," she said. "It's moving weird." The light danced across the sky in impossible patterns, tracing geometric shapes that no satellite or aircraft could manage. We watched, transfixed, as it performed its silent ballet above us. When the others finally went to bed, I stayed, unable to tear myself away. Just before dawn, the light disappeared behind a cloud, then peeked out once more, almost like a goodbye, before vanishing completely. We returned every night that week, the group growing as word spread among the counselors. Each evening, the light returned, closer than before. By Friday, our last night at camp, we were 6. The original 4, plus Kevin from the kitchen, and Lisa, one of the Bible study leaders. The teenagers had all gone to bed after the farewell service, leaving us alone by the water's edge. "Maybe we shouldn't be out here," Lisa whispered, hugging her knees to her chest. "Something feels different tonight." She was right. The air felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. The trees around the lake had stopped swaying, their leaves frozen in the windless dark. Even the water seemed to hold its breath. Then we saw it. The light appeared much lower than before, maybe a few hundred feet up, moving with deliberate purpose. It was larger now, a perfect sphere of soft white light, trailing what looked like a beam of concentrated moonlight. No sound, no heat, just that impossible light, searching. "We should go," Marcus said, but none of us moved. The sphere dipped behind the tree line across the lake, and for a moment, everything went dark. My heart hammered against my ribs as we waited, straining our eyes against the blackness. When it reappeared, it was directly across from us, barely 20 feet above the water's surface. The beam swept across the lake, illuminating each of us in turn. In that light, I saw my friends' faces transformed, not by fear, but by something worse. Wonder, rapture. Their eyes reflected the impossible brightness, pupils dilated to perfect black circles. Sarah stood first, taking a step toward the water. Then Marcus. Jenny. One by one, they walked forward, water soaking their shoes, their clothes. I tried to call out, to move, but my voice died in my throat and my legs wouldn't respond. The light held me there, forcing me to watch. They moved in perfect unison, water now at their waists, their chests. Their faces remained turned upward, expressions serene. Above them, the sphere began to pulse, its light growing brighter, more intense. The air crackled with static electricity. That's when I heard it, not with my ears, but inside my head. A sound like singing, but wrong somehow. The notes bent in ways that music shouldn't, forming patterns that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. My friends stopped moving, now neck deep in the dark water. The sphere descended until it hovered just above the lake's surface. Its light shifted from white to a color I can't describe, a shade that shouldn't exist in nature. In that otherworldly glow, I saw things moving beneath the water. Long, graceful shapes that could have been arms or tentacles or something else entirely, rising up around my friends. I tried to scream, to run, to do anything, but all I could do was watch as 5 simultaneous splashes broke the lake's surface. In the instant before the sphere's light winked out, I caught a glimpse of something massive moving in the depths. A vast, geometric shape that hurt my eyes to look at, all angles and curves that seemed to fold in on themselves impossibly. Then darkness, complete and absolute. When I could move again, I ran to the water's edge, screaming their names. The lake was still and black, as if nothing had happened. No ripples, no bodies, nothing. The police search lasted 2 weeks. They found no bodies, no evidence of drowning. The official report blamed it on a group swimming accident, despite my protests that none of us had gone swimming. They dismissed my story about the light as trauma-induced delusion or guilt-ridden fabrication. But I know what I saw. Sometimes, on clear nights, I look up at the stars and wonder if they're up there somewhere, transformed by that impossible light into something new, something different, something that doesn't belong in our world. The camp closed the following year. The lake is still there, surrounded by those ancient pines. Local teens sometimes break in to drink or swim, not knowing its history. But if you visit at night and look carefully at the water's surface, you might see what I see. Geometric patterns moving in the depths, tracing shapes that shouldn't exist, waiting for the next time that light returns. I haven't touched a drum set since that night. The rhythms remind me too much of that awful singing in my head. But sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I hear it again, that impossible music. And in those moments, I swear I can feel something vast and ancient calling me back to Lake Salvation, promising to show me what my friends saw in those final moments before the water took them. I won't go back, but part of me wonders if I'll have a choice when the light returns. Story 3. The Pier at Lake Worth. The wine stains never came out of my favorite beach shirt. That's such a stupid detail to fixate on, but I think about it whenever I catch myself staring too long at the night sky. The shirt was ruined the night everything changed at Lake Worth Pier. The night we saw something that shouldn't exist. The night we lost Mike. It started like any other summer evening during our college years. 5 of us, me, Mike, Sarah, Devin, and Chris, had claimed our usual spot in the shadows, about 200 feet from the pier. The location was perfect, far enough from the occasional patrol to avoid trouble, close enough to the water to catch the breeze. We'd been coming here for months, sharing cheap wine and cheaper dreams about life after graduation. That night felt different from the start. The air hung thick and static, like the moment before a storm, but without a cloud in sight. The stars seemed sharper, more numerous than usual, their reflections creating shifting patterns in the dark water below the pier. "Check it out," Devon said, pointing toward the horizon. "Someone's letting off flares." We all looked up, expecting to see the brief flash and fade of a marine distress signal. Instead, what we saw was wrong. A sphere of intense orange flame, larger than any flare, moving steadily above the pier. The fire seemed to pulse and writhe around a solid core, like living plasma. "That's way too low for a plane," Sarah whispered, her hand finding mine in the darkness. "And too slow for a meteor." We watched, transfixed, as the burning sphere drifted toward the ocean. The flames grew more intense, casting flickering shadows across the weathered planks of the pier. The heat should have been unbearable at that distance, but the air remained oddly cool. "It's going to hit the water," Chris said, already holding up his phone to record. But there was no impact, no steam, no splash. Instead, the sphere stopped abruptly at the pier's end, hanging motionless for several heartbeats. The flames dimmed to a dull orange glow, revealing something solid beneath. A surface that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Then it turned. The movement was too precise, too deliberate. Natural things don't move that way. The sphere began tracking parallel to the shoreline, directly toward our hiding spot. That's when we should have run. That's what I tell myself now years later. We should have dropped everything and fled. Mike stood up. "I need to see it closer," he said, his voice oddly flat. Before any of us could stop him, he stepped out of the shadows and onto the open beach. The sphere stopped. The orange glow surrounding it began to fold inward, like liquid being poured in reverse. But it wasn't just the light disappearing. The darkness that replaced it had substance, depth. It moved like oil on water, but darker than dark, consuming every photon that dared approach it. "Mike," Sarah called softly, "come back." He didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, staring up at the impossible darkness hanging above the water. That's when we noticed the sound, or rather, the absence of it. The waves had stopped. The distant traffic had gone silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Then Mike took a step forward. I knocked over the wine bottle as I scrambled to my feet, the red liquid soaking into my shirt. By the time I reached the edge of our shadowy refuge, Mike was already ankle-deep in the unnaturally still water. "Something's calling me," he said, still moving forward. "Can't you hear it?" The sphere, now a perfect void in the sky, descended slowly. As it neared the water's surface, I saw movement, not in the sphere itself, but in the space around it. The air rippled like a heat mirage, but instead of distorting what lay behind it, it revealed something else. Glimpses of somewhere that wasn't here, a place where the geometry of space itself seemed to operate under different rules. Mike was waist deep now. The void hung just above the water, perhaps 50 feet away. That's when I noticed the surface of the ocean beginning to rise. Not in waves, but in perfectly formed columns of water, like invisible straws were pulling it upward. They formed a circle around Mike, who had stopped moving, the water now at his chest. "Jesus Christ," Devon breathed. "Look at his eyes." Even from this distance, I could see it. Mike's eyes reflected no light at all. They had become miniature versions of the void above, two perfect black circles in a face that no longer looked entirely human. Sarah screamed. The sound shattered whatever spell had held us frozen, and we ran. The last thing I saw as we fled was Mike's face, split by a smile that was far too wide, filled with far too many teeth. The water columns collapsed around him, just as the darkness above seemed to unfold. We found other people near the pier entrance, a group of teenagers taking selfies. None of them had seen anything unusual. When we told them about Mike, they helped us search the beach. The police came, the Coast Guard. They searched for 3 days before declaring it a presumed drowning. But I know better. We all do. Sometimes I dream about that night, about the void and what I glimpsed behind its veil. In those dreams, I see Mike. He's still smiling that impossible smile, but now he's not alone. There are others with him, all with those same black circle eyes, all moving in ways that human bodies shouldn't be able to move. They're waiting for something, preparing. The wine stains never came out of that shirt. I keep it anyway, tucked in the back of my closet, a reminder that what we saw was real. The news reports still come in every few months. Strange lights over Lake Worth, unexplained disappearances near the pier. The police blame rip currents, drugs, human trafficking, anything but the truth. But I know what's really happening. They're coming back, and next time, they won't just take one. They won't just take one. They won't just take one.